Listen up now, it's time for a treat.
This is the Andre White Talk Show.
It's a call-in show. 404-355-8699 locally or 866-923-2860 out of town.
So what do you think?
Anything under the sun is fair game.
We talk about the issues. We talk about the things that are going to move this country forward.
Andre White tells it like it is.
Don't come in here with that.
No punches pulled.
Put on your big boy pants and stay on the porch.
One way or another.
Either you love him or you hate him.
The most important thing is,
from the White House to the outhouse, on Andre White Talks, we tell it like it is.
It's time for Andre White Talks on Love 860.
Welcome, everyone. This is Andre White, and you're listening to Andre White Talks. Thank everyone for listening. Thank our sponsors, Wayfield Foods, Dr. Mark Roberts at the Roberts Family Dental, and we're going to introduce a couple of other new advertisers in support of our show later on today. I'd like to also thank Monica McCoy for last week's show and giving us great insights about the job market, one's career path, and things that we might want to change in our new year about our personal lives and or our career path. Today is a very interesting day because this afternoon, President Obama will give his final address to America and he will be talking about various things in terms of his administration, things that he's done, things that he wishes he could have done better. And we would like to, here at the Andre White Talks, give support to what I feel is one of America's greatest presidents in my lifetime of the last 52 years, and give some respect and understanding to what it has taken to do the job that he's done under the conditions that he's done it, and in all fairness, be balanced about how we look at the state of affairs of the country as he passes the baton to the 45th president. So that speech will be going on today or this afternoon live from Chicago, and I hope everyone gets a chance to witness it. It's history. It's not only America's first black president who held office for 2 terms and helped turn the country around and save us from a depression, one of the worst recessions America's seen, but it's also an insight in retrospect of an administration that has had to deal with terrorism, has to deal with globalization, has to deal with all types of things that have affected the country in ways that our forefathers could have never imagined. And it also, I'd like to, here again, just to reflect on how the country has been in such disarray. I would never dare call it disrepair, because contrary to some of the rhetoric on the right about the state of affairs in America, and while we have a lot to work on, and as every nation does, and as this nation has always had its fair share of things to work on, I've never thought America, at least in my lifetime, was in such disrepair and broken that we needed to be reminded of that there's a better job to do. That should be the standard, and something of every president and of every person wishing to make the community better is that we can always do better, and we can always do better without dumping on our predecessors, the people that may have laid a foundation, our fathers, our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers, and whatnot. So, these opportunities are few and far between, and so these types of things we just have to be mindful of, because while the president is giving his farewell speech in Chicago, Chicago is probably one of the best examples of places that is in some disrepair and needs a fine-tuning of sorts, just not to make light of all the over 160 murders that they've had this year. But these are just the sorts of things that America has to deal with, and a lot of nations around the world are having to deal with some of these things. But I think probably the more fair way to go about it is to move forward and use what you can use from your predecessors that's positive and not dwell so much on the previous. Well, one of the things that, has happened in the last 24 hours is college football. Alabama Crimson Tide was last year's college champions, and they played Clemson from South Carolina. Heck of a game if you got a chance to see it. Last year was a heck of a game, and the fact that they both found themselves into the college championship again for round 2 was nothing short. If you saw the game, it was nothing short of historic. I heard previously people talking about it being like an Ali Frazier rematch. And before the game started, I thought how silly it was to make that comparison because of how iconic those two people were and how iconic the first fight was and whatnot. But the second game really lived up to the hype. And I'm getting ready to take this conversation somewhere so left that my producer's probably going to look at me, and my father's in the studio today. He's probably going to look at me like I've lost my mind. But one thing that people may not know, for those who realize that the game was in Tampa, Florida, one thing people may not know about Tampa, Florida. I'm from Tampa, Florida, hometown, still spend a lot of time there. Tampa per capita has more strip clubs than any city in America. And while Atlanta is known in certain communities for having a vibrant adult club entertainment opportunities, while Vegas to many may lead the world in such opportunities, Tampa per capita has more strip clubs than any place in America. And our next caller, the person that we're going to interview and talk to next, is an authority within our government on sex trafficking. And so while a lot of guys come to Atlanta, go to Vegas, Tampa, or Miami, and many other places, and they enjoy what we see as adult entertainment, and they find no harm in going in and out and enjoying whatever it is they're enjoying, going home and going about their lives. There's a story there, and many of those stories are ones that most of us would cringe at. And the person that we have on as our guest today is a Mr. Vic Williams. Vic, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can. Vic Williams is an agent with Homeland Security and is what I would call an authority on sex trafficking, not only in the States and in various cities around the United States, but are indeed the problem around the world, and that's it being Sex Trafficking Month. I'm glad to have an opportunity to touch such an indelicate subject, but one that is very necessary in many big cities and indeed many cities around the world. So, Mr. Williams, thank you for coming on the Andre White Talk Show.
Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to share this important information.
Well, now, as I said, this is Sex Trafficking Month, am I right?
Yes. President Obama named, he authorized January 11th as Human Trafficking Awareness Day.
Okay.
So we celebrate the whole month in just bringing awareness because it's so important that people know what's going on in their communities.
Well, thank you, because I was saying sex trafficking is human trafficking, and I'm glad to know that on his last day, on his last address to America, to know that he had the awareness and wherewithal to identify this problem for the problem that it is and give it a day and indeed a month for us to focus on solutions and problems relevant to. I'd like to start off by asking, who does this problem affect? Who gets involved in human trafficking? Who are the victims?
Well, it can affect everyone. I mean, when you talk to most people about human trafficking, they think about the movie Taken.
Yes.
And they think that the word trafficking in itself, kind of like indicates that someone is coming from somewhere else. But, human trafficking has been a part of our culture since I've been alive. And basically part of that culture has been prostitution and pimping. It's always been a part of our culture. Even when you talk to people about human trafficking, it's been such a part of our culture, they don't even think that is human trafficking. But better yet, let me define what it is.
Go ahead.
Human trafficking, there are three major words that define human trafficking. These are the elements: force, fraud, and coercion. Force, obviously, I beat you, make you do what I want you to do. Fraud, come to Miami, come to Atlanta, be a singer, be a movie star, and things get changed. And coercion is it's a fancy word for threats. If you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to hurt your family or someone you love. But those elements only apply if you're over the age of 18. If you're under the age of 18, those elements go completely out of the window. So basically, if you're under the age of 18 and you're being sexually exploited or labor trafficked, you are an instant victim.
Well, now, it's interesting because, I gave a little factoid and anecdote about the college football game championship being in Tampa and how Tampa has, like so many other major cities that are great convention cities in particular, they have a high number of strip clubs, adult entertainment clubs.
Right.
Atlanta, I know you're based out of Miami. Miami certainly has its fair share, and here in Atlanta we have in some cultures known as some of the biggest and the best. How do
Right.
For many that see this sort of industry as no big harm, what are some of the ills that lurk in a strip club environment, for example, for the girls that work there?
Well, I mean, it'd be great to just be in the studio and have a TV show and have a PowerPoint set up and go down the whole list.
Right.
Funny that you asking me about this right now, because yesterday I did a human trafficking presentation for an organization called COAST, Club Operators Against Sex Trafficking. And mainly they are members of strip clubs that are trying to have their business without having this issue of trafficking. When I do my human trafficking presentation, I give away my PowerPoint because it really gives you the indicators of trafficking, what to look for, how to spot it. So I give it away to people so they can, study it more. But when I leave, I try to leave people feeling differently and a different mindset and having them ask themselves, what am I doing to contribute to this problem? So, but if you want to specifically talk about strip clubs, like for instance, I don't do strip clubs anymore. And if I do, I'm working. I don't do bachelor parties anymore that have strippers, because you don't know if that girl is actually there because she wants to be, or she's there because some pimp or trafficker forcing her to be. And I don't do these things because of what I do. I don't do these things because what I do for a living, what it's taught me. I've grown up being influenced by all the many, influences of young men. Going to bachelor parties, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. Going to strip clubs, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, if you don't know the history of the situation of the people that are working there, you may be a part of the problem. And I don't want to be a part of the problem.
Well, that's interesting because when we talk about strip clubs, it's certainly not limited to strip clubs where exploitation happens.
Right.
Who are some of the people that find themselves being exploited, be it adults, children, or otherwise? Who are some of the people? Is there a particular demographic, section of town, area of the country, place in the world? Speak on that.
Well, I don't have the numbers for Atlanta. I work in Miami. So I can tell you Florida is the number 3 state in the country. Miami-Dade is one of the top 3 cities in the nation for trafficking young people. And when I say top 3, Atlanta is in that number 2. They're one of the top 3 cities in the nation for trafficking young people. We say young people, we're talking people under the age of 18. So when you look at this situation, I give you a statistic that's happened in Fort Lauderdale. Out of the 99 kids that were trafficked in Fort Lauderdale last year, 68 of them were community kids, meaning it could have been anyone's kid, not just from a poor side of town or at-risk side of town. Anyone can have an issue with their child, where the child is run away from home or the child is seeking other advice from other people who want to exploit them. So it can literally happen to anyone. When we talk about the movie Taken does happen in America. Every day someone is missing in America, and we don't always find them. So those things do happen. So we have to really, really look at this and rethink and have a new mindset and ask ourselves, how am I, as an individual, perpetuating this problem? And so when I got a bunch of women in the room that I'm asking them about, when I'm doing a presentation, and I ask them all, I say, hey, do you guys eat chocolate? Everybody raised their hand. Yes, I love chocolate. I say, well, do you look at the package of the chocolate and see that it's a labor-free chocolate package, which means that package came from a plant that guarantees you that the kids from Africa were not stolen or sold to this company that picks the cocoa beans that make almost every chocolate bar in the world. These are little things that people need to know and ask ourselves, how am I perpetuating this problem?
Well, now, let me ask you. You say that this can happen to anyone. What is the age range and the spectrum of ages that you find in the course of you're doing this job? Or what have you seen that says that it could be here, it could be this person, or it could be run the spectrum and be, someone else?
Well, we have the ages. The average age of a young boy being involved in this situation is 11. The average age for a girl is 12. We know we've had victims younger than that. So when you look at this, there's really no demographics. I mean, like I said, it can happen everywhere. If I was in a studio showing you my PowerPoint, I could show you stories, like horrific stories that are happening in every community. And I give you an example. If you want to know if you have trafficking in your community, there's this site that you could go to, Backpage.com, which I was just informed today that you might can't go on that site right now because it's been shut down. And what is Backpage.com? Well, just recently I was in Vietnam for 2 weeks. I was in Hanoi for a week and Ho Chi Minh City for a week, speaking to mid to high level law enforcement officials, training them on human trafficking. And I asked them, hey, you ever heard of Backpage.com? They said no. So I went Backpage.com Hanoi, Backpage.com Ho Chi Minh City, and you would see pages and pages of women for sale on that site.
Wow.
And if you look very closely at someone that says, hey, they're 19 or 20, if you look very closely, you take off the makeup, you take off the sexy clothes, you might even see a 14 or 15-year-old girl. So I don't care. Everywhere I've traveled in the world, I've pulled up Backpage, Budapest, Hungary, I've worked there. Botswana, Africa, I've worked there. And every site, there are girls for sale. So if you go Atlanta, you could pull up right now. But Backpage isn't the only site. There are others. But it's a huge victory for this community that work in human trafficking to learn that possibly Backpage has now been removed and shut down as a website.
Now, our guest today is Mr. Vic Williams. He is an agent for Homeland Security. He is what I would call an authority on human trafficking, and we've been discussing in the first half hour here at the Andre White Talk Show what is human trafficking, how to identify it, who might it affect, who's affected by it in the community, and many other things that we'll get into. But for right now, Mr. Williams, I'd like to talk about how the Internet has enabled the victims, the perpetrators of sex trafficking, and many others. But before we get into that, I'd like to take a call from one of our callers. Caller, go ahead.
Yvette. And I appreciate the conversation, but I do have a question. My sister is a school teacher, and I just wonder, what can school teachers look for in children to know if they are in a dangerous situation or if they are children who are likely to be taken as human trafficking victims? And what can you do if you see a problem? Who do you reach out to?
Well, caller, thank you for your call. And Mr. Williams, that's a very interesting question because there are many people in many different jobs in the community that would serve as the front line of people that could observe things more closely relevant to the children and people that may be identified as being trafficked. So per the question of our caller, how can a school teacher or anyone else identify someone that might possibly be a victim of human trafficking?
But that's a great question. And before I answer the question, I want to give out this important number. It's to our national hotline. They just changed the name. It's run by an organization called Polaris. If you want to look them up, it's polarisproject.org. That's where I get most of my statistics, around the country. They monitor, the hotline 24/7. They do a great job, and we've gotten many of leads from people calling that 888-3737-888 number. That's 888-3737-888. Now, to get back to your caller's question, you know what? Every community that works human trafficking, even right here in Dade County, it's a great community to work in. We're on it. We're working together. But kids are the biggest threat. Traffickers are targeting them more than anything, whether they're in an elementary school or college. We're trying to get some type of educational program for teachers. I know Dade County right now is working on something like a virtual university where all teachers have to sign in and go through human trafficking training. They have programs where, or put teachers in situations to be able to spot. But the problem is that it's not moving fast enough. People are dragging their feet on really taking this serious. Human trafficking, now you may hear different statistics that it's the number 2 crime in the world, the number 3 crime in the world. But to me, it's the number 1 crime in the world, second to drugs. And this is why I say that. Experts say that there are more people enslaved today than ever in the history of Earth. Well, if that is the case, that's a lot of people. But the second part to that is that if you don't know how to identify human trafficking, how do you report it? So if you're a teacher sitting in a class and you work in kind of like a low-income area, but a student is coming in with a purse more expensive than yours, she's coming in with shoes more expensive than you can afford, she got the latest cell phone, and she's saying, oh, my boyfriend bought this for me, her boyfriend is 30, 40 years old, those are some signs that something's going on. So when you work in that environment, teachers have to, I employ every school district. We got to get on this. The problem that's happening in Dade is that, we're going to get to the point where we're educating principals and teachers, but what are we doing about the kids?
Well,
they need to know more than anything what's happening and how to protect themselves.
Well, to my understanding, if a young person is in that life, from policemen that I've talked to, other entities that run safe homes for individuals hoping to escape that life, not many of these younger people might even be in school that are in the throes of this industry. Is that true?
True. Yeah, that's true because, you get a lot of runaways. A kid runs away from home within 48 hours of running away. They could be approached by a trafficker. So you may be right, but then there is that population that are living right under the roofs of their parents and being trafficked, and the parents don't even know.
How does that happen?
Well, I give you a story. A young girl in high school, she was attracted to a really handsome guy, and one day this handsome guy asked her, hey, you want to ride home? So she was flattered. Oh, yes. Gave her a ride home. On the way home, he goes, oh, look, I got to stop by my house. You mind if I stop by the house? Oh, no problem. Hey, you want to see my room? Oh, sure. She goes up to the room. He rapes her. But while she's being raped, she doesn't know that his buddies are inside the closet recording it. And by the time the whole situation is over, they've edited this tape to make her believe or to say that, hey, if you say anything about this, we're going to show this tape to everybody, which is going to be edited and make it look like you were having fun in doing this.
Right.
They made that young lady leave her house late at night when her parents were sleeping, sneak out the window, and they would take her to places where she was forced to have sex with men and then return her. And parents didn't even know about it until one day she was saved by a waitress who one night these guys just, after they used her, they threw her out in the streets, and she wandered into a restaurant, and the police came and, they finally followed the story and arrested the kid. But that kid was recruited by adults. If you Google Sarasota High School human trafficking, you'll find a story that last year adults had recruited kids to recruit their classmates, and a lot of kids in the class were being trafficked. They were being hired to have sex with people for money and booze. Almost a large number of the students in the high school were participating in that.
Wow.
So kids are very vulnerable. They're very vulnerable. Every day your child walks out the door, they are vulnerable to the world unless we prepared them for that.
All right. Well, that leads me to the next question. How do we best prepare, educate ourselves and our children to help guard against this activity and our kids falling victim to this?
Well, first of all, we got to educate ourselves what it is. So if I was on TV using my PowerPoint, I talk about what happened in the United States. These numbers are a little higher. I have a $9.5 billion a year industry in the United States. There's a section that says over 300,000 children are at risk of being commercially sexually exploited. And people can hear the victim in that. 300,000 children commercially sexually exploited. But if I were to change those numbers or the verbiage and say over 300,000 men and women are being at risk of being prostituted, in America, we've been cultured to believe when we hear the word prostitute that is a person making a choice, that there is no way they're a victim because they're not tied up. If they want help, they can run out, they can go get help, whatever. But what I try to educate people, and this is a mindset change that we need to start having in America. If we hear the word prostitute, you got to think mental slavery. You got to think the invisible chains. It's just because you don't see me tied up, gagged, or chained to a bed, it doesn't mean that I'm not enslaved. By the way, if I have your mind, I got your body. If I want to be in control of you, I don't want to have to tie you down. I want your mind, because if I got your mind, you're going to go and do what I tell you to do. So to start off with the education of ourselves, to get rid of these myths and change our mindset and change our hearts in the way we look at some of this stuff around the country. And that's why, when I leave or I do my presentations, I ask people, ask yourself, what am I doing to perpetuate this problem? Am I judging the girl out on the street? Because this is what happened. The trafficker is in control of her mind, and the trafficker tells her the police are going to arrest you. Society is going to judge you. Nobody cares about you but me. So when society changed their attitudes about a situation and be a little bit more open arms to that girl on the street instead of judging them, maybe we can start making a change. But we've got to start by really educating ourselves and changing our personal mindset and views on how we see certain things.
We're going to Ray White, and we have as our special guest today Vic Williams, who's an agent for Homeland Security and an authority on human trafficking. We've been discussing the elements of human trafficking, who might be trafficked, how it affects the community, and yet what are some of the tools, i.e. the Internet? How does the Internet enable not only people that are being trafficking, but people that are looking to support such an illicit industry? Mr. Williams? Have we lost our caller?
No, I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you hear the question?
You got me?
Yes.
You got me?
Yeah, I got you. I was asking, how does the internet help to enable sex traffickers and the people participating in the industry?
What I was saying is that the internet, there's great things about the internet, but there are also horrible things about the internet. What the internet has done, now imagine if you have 1 billion people on Facebook and your kid is on Facebook and you're not monitoring who your kid is talking to or whatever. That means your kid, 1 billion people have access to your child.
Right.
And you know what I mean? And they don't all mean good for your child. A lot of them, some are bad people. So if you are not monitoring what your child is doing on the internet, you're putting your kid and your family at risk. I could give you a quick story that we have a case out of Dallas, Texas, where a young kid, her mother and child her parents had gone through a divorce. And as the mother was trying to reconstruct their lives, she lost communication with her child going through the frustration. So she would go to the internet to vent her frustrations. As she's venting, traffickers are online looking for this language. And a young lady picked up on her internet and was, I understand what you're going through, and cultivated her relationship with her on the internet to that one final day. The child was on the line venting her frustrations, and the young lady convinced the child to come meet her. So the young lady left, the child left, thinking, I'm going to go to this girl's house. I'm going to have fun with her. We're going to eat popcorn, watch movies. Little did she know, she wasn't taken to her house. She was taken to a hotel. And who was in the hotel? Mr. Trafficker. And that child, for at least several months, was being victimized as a human trafficking victim before the police finally found her and was able to return her at home. There's so many stories that Facebook did a community experiment with families where the mother and father said, my daughter would never leave. She would never leave the house. And they've done this several times. Well, they pretended to be a 15-year-old kid that just moved in the neighborhood, contacted this family's daughter with the permission of the parents. And the 15-year-old kid pretended to be the kid, said, hey, I'm new in the neighborhood. Can you show me around? And the young girl was like, yeah, I'll show you around. She says, look, okay, my brother's going to come pick you up because obviously I'm not old enough to drive. She goes, okay, wait till my parents go to sleep. I'll meet you. And this is all being recorded with the parents' permission. This kid left her house and got in that van, and her parents was in the back. And when they had on masks, and when she looked in the back and saw the mask, she started to scream. And, of course, I think that freaked her out more than anything. But those are some of the examples that are happening in America. Every time I'm in a room with a bunch of kids, I ask, how many of you have access to the internet? They all raise their hands. How many of you talk to people on the internet you don't know? A lot of them raise their hands. And then when I ask this question, how many of you kids actually go out and meet these people that you met on the internet that you don't know? Some of them are brave enough to raise their hands. Parents have to be aware of this danger.
Well, now let me ask you, because I would assume that maybe someone listening to the show or just thinking about the industry in general might have this idea in their head that the kids that may be more susceptible to being in the industry for falling victim to this would be children that have home problems with their parents, a lot of personal issues or whatnot. Is that true, or does it just run the spectrum?
Well, that's totally true. Again, if I had, your viewers can see my PowerPoint. We talk about, Homeland Security strategy with dealing with human trafficking. I'm gonna cut to two big ones, but then I'm gonna go back to the main one to answer your question. So part of it is being in partnership with the community. I'm the coordinator for the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force. If you want to see some good information, go to South Florida. It's SF for South Florida. HumanTraffIckingTaskForce.org is our website. You can get some information and learn a lot of stuff. So partnership with the community is very important because I have non-government organizations, churches, other government entities that service victims from different many areas, private citizens. We need the community to partnership with law enforcement to fight this, because when we find victims, we need to be able to provide those victims with services that we don't have. So it's very important to start a task force, start a coalition or something, be a part of it to help. The second part is just awareness, just making people aware of what's happening in their community. Those are two other things that we really need to do. But the main part of our strategy is understanding the victim-centered approach. If you understand the victim-centered approach, you understand human trafficking. One of the most frustrating things in my job is when I come across a police officer and he tells me, oh, she's not a real victim. And I go, why? He'll say, because she's not cooperating with my investigation. What people got to understand about human trafficking victims, they're not a regular victim in the sense where, hey, I just got raped, help me. You help out in the investigation. You call the police, hey, I just got robbed, help me. Most of the times that we come across our victims of human trafficking, it's not because they called us. It's because of some other illegal activity. Through questioning situations, we see what happened and come to a determination this person is possibly a human trafficking victim, but they didn't call us. They don't see themselves as a victim. And most victims, to get to the point of your question, have had issues of abuse, verbal, physical, sexual, just different traumatic things, and that's the key word. You have to understand the Stockholm Syndrome. You have to understand trauma bonding to understand human trafficking.
Well, let's define those things for our listeners, Stockholm Syndrome and trauma bonding.
Well, Stockholm Syndrome is something that came about years ago when they saw in Stockholm, Sweden, there was a bank robbery, and I think the bank robbery went for 12 or 24 hours. But when the bank robbery was over, everybody in the bank was for the bank robberies. And they're like, wait a minute, you just held me, you just held these people for 24 hours hostage. But when the people came out of the bank, they were like, oh, no, these guys were nice to us, And so they started to study some of these things, and that began a study on trauma and different things like that. A kid that's, when you've been abused most of your life or been raped by, family members, and it's never been resolved properly, when you get to your adulthood, if you had 3 to 4 traumatic situations, you are at risk of being a human trafficking victim. These are some of the studies that are going on with the brain right now that are amazing, that we're figuring out that your brain doesn't fully mature to the age of 25. Now, I'm not an expert on trauma, but there's a lot of good information. Matter of fact, when we have cases, when we go to court, I have to bring an expert in to explain to the jury why they didn't leave. It should remind you something about like when we used to have, we still have this problem, domestic violence. And in our day, people used to ask why they don't leave. And they found out why women didn't leave. And this is some of the stuff that we're finding out with trafficking victims, or victims where they're labor trafficked or sexually exploited or servitude. There's a trauma issue there. And what's that old saying? Better the devil known than unknown.
You're right.
So being in a situation where I am that want to help, sometimes if you don't understand what you're doing in this business, people can't understand. Why would you want to stay there? Because that's all they know.
Right.
They're traumatized, and it freaks them out more to go into a situation that they don't know. It freaks them out more.
And or the embarrassment of it being revealed what they've been through.
Right, exactly. I mean, you touch on something so serious. That story that I told you about that young girl that was trafficked over the Internet, even when the police found her, she did not readily admit what was going on out of the trauma that she had experienced, the embarrassment that she let herself get caught up in this. A lot of victims don't see themselves as victims. I don't even like using that word, but that's the law and that's what they are. But a lot of times you have to be able to understand. And I'm going to tell you, one of the hardest part of my job is when I come across a victim of human trafficking. And what I had to learn is not to have an expectation of what I expect them to do. That's the victim-centered approach. When I approach a victim now, my questions are, what can I do for you? What do you need? How can I help you? I don't have an expectation. I don't ask questions about the investigation unless they're ready for that. You got to understand it. And this is a hard thing for police officers to understand because that's not the culture of us. We want to help. We want to put people in jail. We're used to getting that call, help me. We show up. We're getting a cooperation. So we have to change our culture in dealing with human trafficking victims to understand that that's not going to happen. It's very rare you're going to get them immediately want you to help. So another thing I had to understand, that there's no magic words or no magic action. I can't help you until you're ready to be helped.
Well, now, I have to go in a direction that we're here in Atlanta. And Atlanta has right now the biggest bubble of an entertainment industry, i.e. movies and music, than Atlanta has ever had, that the South has ever had. Right. But one of the staples of the Atlanta entertainment community is its hip-hop and rap culture.
Right.
And there are many in the community that would suggest, through lyrics and videos, rap in particular has gone a long way to help exploit or desensitize the community to the sexualization of women in a way that is never been seen before in videos, and has gone a long way to make callous our approach to the way we objectify women in such a way that might even lead to enabling people in this industry. Would you like to speak to that at all?
You know, dude, you're so right, because, you know, when I've been transformed learning about human trafficking, and I say if most men knew what I know, we could cut down the numbers. You know, when I talk about human trafficking and when I talk about how cultured we are, you know, where was the outrage when we got MTV, Pimp My Car, Pimp My House? You know, we hear it in our music every day. You know, it's there. You know, and there's no outrage from the community to fight against that. If it is, it's not enough, and nobody's listening. So you're right. When a young girl every day hears on the radio, you're a B, you're this, or and in her environment may be the same thing, what do you think? You know, she's going to be desensitized to, you know,
her own sense of worth.
Say again?
She'll be desensitized to her own sense of worth. Right.
So, you know, it's a cultural issue. We have to change culture. We have to change mindset. But note this, Mr. White, we're never going to resolve this problem. What we got to understand about this problem, human trafficking, it's one of many problems that we have in the world. But it's not the base problem. The base problem of human trafficking victims starts at home and cultivated in the community. That's the issue. So in a perfect world, I would like to see this country take on the issues of, you know, being one of the priorities, making sure families are together, making sure that they're able to deal with their issues. Because if kids are our future, if they are our future, they need to be our number one priority. It shouldn't be a homeless child, a hungry child, an educated child, and I don't know how we can do it, because I know we have, you know, safe houses, we have places for kids to go. It's just so much work that can be done in that area that could improve this problem. But as long as you have people willing to buy people, you'll have somebody there to sell. This is a family issue. This is where it starts, but the community helped cultivate it.
Well, Mr. Williams, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. I'd like to thank you for imparting all the wisdom and knowledge that you have about an industry and an aspect of our collective society, not only here in Atlanta, there in Miami, but around the world, something that is of great ill in our community and affects so many of us in so many different ways. So once again, thank you for coming on the show, and I'd like to have you on later on in the year to kind of update us on some of the things that have going on in the industry.
Right, because I would like to talk about some of the laws that have changed, some of the things that we made progress in. But I know you probably run out of time. I'll come back a later date. But I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to just open up the door and put a bug in your listeners' ear if they never heard human trafficking from this level before.
Well, great. Once again, thank you for coming on the show, and we look forward to having you on later.
All right, take care, sir. Bye.
Well, here again, thanks to Mr. Williams for coming on. Sex trafficking, human trafficking is the exploitation of minors or anyone that finds themselves forced or coerced into such an industry. We have to look at this, as he said, as one that really starts with those who are most vulnerable in our community, and that would be our children. Our relationships with our children is one that, if we don't get it right as soon as we can out the gate, leads to an array of problems, many of which are known, some of which can't be seen or known, and they develop later and result into things like this and things that become a bigger problem for our families and our communities as a whole. So once again, thank you for Mr. Williams for coming on. And I'd like to thank our listeners and our sponsors, the Georgia Sentinel, Roberts Family Dental, and Wayfield Food, for supporting the Andre White Talk Show. This is Andre White, and you've been listening to Andre White Talks.